Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Bubble podcast. Today we have with us a very, very special guest, Pierre-Louis Theron, who is the founder and I believe CEO of Alpic. He is a repeat founder who's already built and sold a company to Fortune 500 companies. He studied engineering at École Centrale Paris, where he co-founded Streamroot in 2013 with two co-founders. Streamroot invented peer-to-peer video delivery tech that sat on top of CDNs. That's a mouthful, but we'll go deeper into that in just a moment. The app let viewers share content with each other instead of all hitting the same server. During the 2018 FIFA World Cup, their tech kept French streaming platforms running when millions tuned it to watch. Again, this is very, very useful considering there's a World Cup going on, and it's expected that over 5 billion people will be tuning in at some point during this World Cup. They went through the Techstars Boston platform in 2014, raised $6 million, were acquired by CenturyLink, which is now Lumen Technologies. In 2019, Pierre-Louis stayed at Lumen as VP of Product, running their global CDN for 3 years. In July 2025, he reunited with his Streamroot co-founder, Nikolay Rodionov, to start Alpic, which really is spearheading the MCP system or the platform that has seemingly emerged after the AI age. These days, it's all about MCP. Every app, every AI tool that I'm hearing about, they're talking about MCP over the last couple of weeks. I got my hands dirty in building sort of AI agents and building AI first apps, and I've now suddenly realized the power of this technology. Pia, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us on the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Just as a quick starter, I want to get a sense of what Alpic does. What are you guys up to? How do you see the current AI space evolving?
Yeah, I mean, our peak is basically we're finding our peak because of the vision that the internet is gonna change dramatically, and that the Google search bar has been the entry point of the internet for the past 20, 25 years now. But now the entry point is changing, is becoming AI chatbots, AI agents, and the way we are consuming the internet is going to be less and less through websites, static website and mobile application, and more through these AI agents. And we believe that all the companies in the world, whether they sell products, services, or just uh, presenting their product online, will need to talk to AI in an AI native way. And what they have today is not enough. Websites, APIs have not been made for this type of communication. So this is why we built Alpic to power that revolution and create tooling and infrastructure for people that will need to build this new interface and will need to deploy them, secure them, monitor them, scale them, and we want to be the home for that.
That makes a lot of sense. I want to sort of double down on that and get a non-technical understanding of that, right? So right now, my understanding is if you consider, let's say, the average chatbot, I'm not even going deeper into agents, independent agents, but I'm saying, let's say, Chat GPT has probably agents behind it that go out and search for different data and content. When I query Chat GPT today, normally my understanding is it does some sort of a search, it goes and reads certain content from different websites, and then it comes back and then sort of tells me about it, right? So you mentioned that there isn't enough infrastructure that enables for a lot of these agents to come in and consume their content. How is that different? Because ChatGPT already does that again on a
Yeah,
very basic level.
ChatGPT is already doing some amazing things, but perhaps let's double click on how it is actually working. Uh, the to make it simple, the way this model is gonna give you an answer is based on like first the pre-training. It's been like a lot of discussion, explanation about pre-training is basically feeding them with as much data as you can, the whole internet basically, and they're gonna be smart about it. So they're gonna be using that to answer you. The second step is everything which is done around like post training, reinforcement learning, which is basically taking some specific data sets that's going to make the model smarter about one specific topic or a few specific topics. So that's kind of everything that they have in their brain. Now, because they are not trained every day, they also need to have access to the internet, to what's going on, what's up there, what's the news, what's the latest product, what's the latest pricing, and everything. And the way they're doing it today is basically mostly through web search. And it's basically Google. So what these guys have been doing is that they've been indexing the web. So they spent the past couple of years building web crawlers that are crawling the internet, and indexing as many pages as they can. So when the model needs to have access to the internet, it basically does a web query, an index query to that index to find the right pages. So imagine the model pinging a gigantic databases and gets 10 blue links like Google give you when you're doing a search. And the model is going to go through these 10 or 20 blue links, read them all super, super fast, and aggregate that info and give it back to you. So that's basically the way it is working today, which is again amazing. Think about where we were three years ago. But it's pretty dumb as well. It's like reading something, trying to make sense out of it, and also web pages are not at all made for models. They're not made for agents. They've been made for humans. So it's
Mm.
like UI, ads, pictures, buttons, everything that we've been building to make the best human interface possible for the past 20 years, but it hasn't been at all built for these agents. So when you're looking at, like, for example, let's say a very concrete example, I'm looking to book a flight, which is like the most typical use case everyone has been using in the agentic world for the past 3 years. I need to go to New York next week. Please find me the best options. We're spending so much time on that we hope soon it will be completely solved by an agent. Um, Today, the way a model will do it will just, again, like I said, putting a few websites and try to get some links and giving you links in the conversation. So then you go to the website. I believe that a more AI native world is emerging where first everything will happen within the chat interface or within the agent interface, whether it's a chat or not, we'll see. And that the redirection to the links of the website are just something of the past. And that the model could potentially directly be connected to the backend system of Booking.com, to the backend system of Expedia, to the backend system of Delta Airlines, and find the best option for me, and then offer me a few options, and I will book directly within the agent, and it will be just done. Obviously, we'll see how the payment stuff is done and so on. There's a bunch of problems to be solved still, but the experience I think will be more AI native than it is today by just like, hey, I found a few links. Now you can go to these links and try to book right now. So this is exactly why I believe AI native protocol like MCP can really change the internet, because now we have an AI native protocol that can connect backend system directly with LLM. It's AI native. They speak the same language, and they can go way further in the agentic revolution than
Mm.
just sending a few links so you can visit websites.
That makes sense. For MCPs, I mean it's model context protocol. So my understanding is it's designed for the models to contextualize what any particular um, software or tool or app is essentially doing. I'm curious though, because technically for the layman, the API was supposed to do that, right? So you had the front end, which was the UI UX focused, very human way of interactions. And then you had the APIs, the software layer, which could essentially do all of the same things, but you did not need like beautiful visuals for it. It was all sort of, you could code it essentially. Now
Exactly.
with agents coming in and really championing coding in the start with Claude Code, and now every other agent doing that, why do we need MCP when APIs already exist?
It's a really good question, and it's actually I think when MCP came out, it was originally at the beginning not very well understood, and kind of people were using it for everything and anything. There were like people saying like, "Well, now API is dead. I do everything MCP. Like it's over." Then there's been a phase where like MCP was dead because it was so bad for so many reasons, and now we kind of going through a little bit of maturation where we start to understand, okay, what is it for? When is it actually useful? When it is not useful? So I try to make it clear. Uh, APIs have been designed mostly to present an exhaustive view of what a backend can do. You present a list of capabilities that is pretty extensive, that's like a catalog of all the
Mm,
things you can do. It's like a big menu, right?
mm,
And then based on that big backend catalog, you build something that is predictable with UI that's going to call one or a bunch of APIs at the same time to go to the next step of the process.
mm.
Um, the thing with MCP is that we call it MCP servers and there's the MCP client, but at our peak, we really see MCP as a new front end. It's a front end for agents.
Okay.
The way you're designing an MCP server is to be the interface that you're going to expose to the agent. But the agent really behave in a way like a human. If you give him a massive API with a massive documentation, every time is coming, he will need to discover and understand how all these APIs are working, which will be a big mess, even though they are really smart at coding.
Mm,
With MCP, you're designing them with an intent in mind. You're not designing them to be exhaustive. You did, for example, take going back to the flight search use case that I took earlier. When you're designing an MCP server, you're designing a tool which is going to be flight search that might be coding 6 APIs in the background to gather all the right information and send back to the user pictures, price, flights, airport, so many information that might be coming from like a pretty hairy and complicated API stack on the background. And the model, it will be way more efficient to do it that way than having the model just crawling all the API existing and trying to figure out and make sense out of it every time is coming back to it.
mm,
So that's very important point. There's a really nice discoverability aspect as well with MCP, where the model can discover MCP and learn directly when they use it. But there's also some bad things about MCP. That's the reason some people called it dead a few months ago. Um, one of them being the management of the context window, because with MCP you tend to send a lot of context back to the model, and if you start connecting a zillion MCP servers, your model is going to be completely lost. So that's one of the big problems. But that's an engineering problem, right? It's like when you're going on your browser, you're not connected to all the websites in the world, right? You're going through some search iteration until you actually connect to one website. So this is something that's getting slowly but surely solved. And actually, the fact that models are really good at coding, like you said earlier, there's something that's been implemented by Anthropic and Cloudflare, which is called code mode, which is a way of actually using code to call the MCP instead of using the entirety of the context and the protocol communication. So there's a lot of innovation still. It's definitely not perfect. There's I think there was a lot of iteration needed to be where we are right now, and there's going to be a lot more coming. But what's amazing is the community that's been created around it that are trying to push it forward, improve it, from all the big companies in the world, and also smaller companies like us that are contributing quite a bit.
No, that makes sense. I want to go deeper into the technical side of things. You mentioned the server and the client side, and how does that sort of end up happening? But just a last question on really the way that you imagine the future to look like, and the way that I'd sort of talk about that is there's this new sort of very exciting agent that's come out. It's called Ollie. It sort of automates your family's very complicated system. So, for example, I have a 5-year old son. I have a 1-year old daughter. We're a family of four. And increasingly, particularly for middle aged families, young and middle aged families, your family life looks like a nightmare. There are football matches, there are tons of utility bills that you have to pay, there are tons of these classes that kids have to go to. You have a social calendar. The wife has the calendar, you have a calendar, kids have their own schedules. So, what this agent does is it manages everything for you. It's your fifth member if you have a family of four, and it keeps a track of everything. It's very exciting the way that they sort of created it. The launch video was interesting as well. And this was a very sort of direct to consumer, very sort of daily life use case, right? It wasn't because a lot of these use cases that were coming in originally were very B2B, very commercial, very enterprise.
Yeah, of course.
And the moment it came out, my thought was, how does the agent have access to a bunch of these tools and services? Because it's basically saying that it's going to manage your entire life. And you're actually beginning to manage families. The horizon is really wide, right? Because you're connected to the kids' school as well. You're connected to a billion apps. They're taking drum lessons online. They're connected to that as well, so on and so forth. I'm curious, and the first thing that I imagined was, if this is what's happening, where I have this personal assistant in my life now, and maybe I have a bunch of personal assistants. I have a work personal assistant and a family personal assistant and a friend's personal assistant. Then maybe that's the person that I'm talking to. I'm no longer going to Google figuring a bunch of these things out. I've essentially automated that process, and I'm just now directly, everybody is that executive billionaire, back in the day, because that
Exactly.
executive billionaire wasn't sitting down and Googling. They had an assistant. They'd be like, listen, figure out a good restaurant and figure out a time for that. And based on what you know about me, make sure you don't screw it up, right? So now you have these assistants doing it. And the whole user experience of going to Google, figuring something out, read a billion blogs, then actually finding out what you have to do, coordinating with that particular organization or whatever, and then finally managing it. I think that's the future that I'm beginning to see now, where the entire interaction of how we sort of interact with technology is going to change maybe 10 years from now. A, would you agree there? Because that's a foundational shift. That basically means a lot of the top companies like Google and Meta and so on and so forth, the way that their consumers work, the advertising revenue, so on and so forth, a lot of that will fundamentally change. That's trillions of dollars of value evolving into something entirely new. And secondly, how does then MCP as a technology come in play as this experience is sort of being built?
First of all, I need to check out your Oli assistant because I also have two kids, one 5, 1 years old. So my life is getting wild right now. So I'll check it out, and I actually did some open close stuff for myself, which is kind of fun to set up. Um, Listen, I believe websites are dead. I think the whole uh, headless movement that started recently around the SaaS world. It's like SaaS are going headless, so it's you don't go to the dashboard and the web dashboard anymore. I think this is just getting started. I think
Mhm.
it started with SaaS application dashboarding, which are awful and a pain for all of us to learn and use, to the entire internet, where basically my two kids again, I don't think they will ever go to a website like when they're grown up. I think they just ask whatever agent they're using. Uh, I am unclear whether it's going to be one super agent or like 1,000 agents.
Mm,
It's probably going to be a mix. My vision is that we always end up in a couple of platforms. So back in the 80s and the 90s, we ended up in Windows and Apple. Then we ended up in like Google, and then we ended up in Chrome and perhaps Firefox and IE, and then we ended up in Android and iOS. So this is why I tend to believe that we're going to end up in a couple of platforms as well. And that's the whole platforming aspect will probably would be something like ChatGPT and Claude and perhaps one or two others depending on the region of the world. Um, so that would go more into like a one agents that rule them all. And this world where you have kind of your super crazy smart assistant that can then be connected to the entire your entire life or the entire system and do stuff for you. I believe it 100%. Now, the timing, I'm not sure. We start to see it emerging, which is super exciting, but I still think we need to fix and figure out a bunch of stuff. So now going back to how does it work? Because yeah, the
mm,
vision, I think we can all agree, but how it actually happened technically behind the scene.
mm, mm,
Um, I think we're gonna have a mix for a very long time of what's available right now, which is websites. So browsing agents, web search, all of that will be part of the mix because well, your kids college or kids high school might not have an MCP anytime soon. So the model will need to figure out a way to have access to this information. And at the same time, we'll see emerging AI native interfaces that are going to be directly plugged in a more like streamlined way and efficient way, less token intensive as well.
mm.
And these two are going to be living together for a little bit of time until kind of an agent first internet or agent first interface are fully taking over. And that's really exciting because that's exactly why we're building this company. And there's still like so many problems to solve. So yeah, I mean, this is exactly the way I see it, and I think it's going to be so exciting, and I can't wait to see my kids making fun of me when I'll tell them, back in the days, I was typing on Google through 10 websites, and then I was doing another spreadsheet when I putting all the links so I can share it with my friend and they can give me feedback. And then we were actually booking the Airbnb like that. It's like they were like, oh my god, what? Like that sounds like the Middle Ages.
No, that makes sense. In terms of the technical aspects, you mentioned MCP server and then in clients and so I'm curious about if I correlate this, let's say, with the early stages of the internet, when for the vast majority of the consumer, WordPress was really what championed their entrance onto the digital layer or the internet layer. And again, for WordPress itself, you had to host it somewhere, um, and then obviously you had to ensure that it was properly exposed and people could discover it. We're going to talk about discovery in just a little bit, but I just want to get a sense of how does MCP work. Like if I have an app or I have a website or I have a small business, what do I like? What do I do? How do I build an app on top of my website and I make sure that there is some sort of whenever someone comes in, there is a way in for the agent to do its agentic things as an MCP server. What how does that sort of work? Give me a technical sense of and by technical I mean what all infrastructure is required to make it work for the average user, for the small and medium enterprise, for the non-technical pizza shop that just wants to be available on the internet to agents.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. It's like, okay, everything that you just said sounds cool. Now, how do I do it? And that's usually the discussion I have with my customers. Like, yeah, well, how do we make it happen now? So first, going back to the client server thing, MCP is a protocol built on top of HTTP. So at the end of the day, you have kind of the same logic where you have a client to server communication that goes over HTTP. So think about, I think a good comparison is like your Chrome browser is now ChatGPT and your web server is now an MCP server. It's kind of a, to make it like kind of simple.
Mm,
Um, the the MCP server itself, it's basically a transformation layer between your backend and the model. So
mm,
again, I said that earlier, you need to design it with an intent. You need to design it with like what exactly you want to put it in there. But you also might need some off-the-shelf things. Like you said, like
mm,
WordPress, you just like have like a few blocks at the beginning and you were making your website overnight, which was absolutely amazing. Um, so with that in mind, the thing you need to do, it really depends on who you are. So first, going from like the most technical person, there's like open source framework out there, including the one that we built at Alpic called Skybridge, which is an open source framework to build this MCP application. And you can use your coding agents and use, we have a skill, and you can ask him like, well, you know what, here's my API key for my backend. I want to build an MCP app that does X, Y, Z. Just do it for me. And then you can iterate on that. You can play with it, make it prettier, changing the flow, kind of as you would build a front end or a mobile app. Once that's done, you need a place to host it because again, it's a web server. So
mm,
you can use one of your favorite tool that you're already using to deploy your application, or you can use some new technology like ours, which is basically a cloud platform where you can deploy and host your MCP servers and your MCP application. And we're providing a whole bunch of tooling that are going to be very, very keen for this future development, like a playground, analytics, understanding the user intent, helping you being discoverable, which we'll talk about discoverable later. So what we're building at Alpic, the open source framework, so you can build your own custom MCP and the hosting platform. But if you're small and medium enterprises, there's people that are built on top of this framework as well. Some really cool kind of off the shelf tooling that you can just use and say, you know what, here's my API key, just build me like an off the shelf, super simple, carousel like, map like type of tooling. And you can get going with this type of tool. And the team at Noodle have been doing like an amazing job there. There's other players as well out there. And it's super exciting because that bring that technicality, and because technicality is going down so much, is absolutely incredible. It's like you
mm,
can,
mm,
an average person can build something very complex very easily. And I think it's so amazing that it brings back the power to the people with the ideas, instead of only giving it to the people that have the technicality and the know-how.
Makes sense. Let's talk about discoverability now. And the reason why I think it's extremely important is because I feel like the current mainstream, or rather mainstreaming of MCP as a technology
Yeah,
is stuck between a chicken and an egg.
yeah,
And it's for a vast majority of people, the only incentive they have for enabling MCP onto their websites, onto their businesses, I would say, is discoverability. The reason why Google worked, the only exclusive use case that early stage internet had for a vast majority of businesses and people was the fact that that became the initial touch point of the world. And so you could Google pizza and it would tell you, what are the closest pizza shops, what are people using. And so the aspect of discoverability was what led to millions and hundreds of millions of businesses and websites being created. The reason why I say it's a chicken and egg right now is because, barring the whole technical AI first sort of community, the vast majority of people do not really care about what's going on. And in many ways, a lot of these AI tools and technologies end up being a novelty. It's like a nice to have, because just because you can do it. And for technical people, it's like bragging rights. Oh, I have a MCP ready system built
Yeah,
that an agent at some point can use it. But how is the agent even finding it? Do I have to go to my customers and say, stop using Google, now start using this particular technology? That's complicated and costly for me to change my users' behavior. I'm a pizza shop. I don't want to change their technological experiences, right? So tell me a bit about how the discoverability in this new world will potentially look like. Um, and And do you expect, because right now, even with Noodle Seed, for example, they're building these sort of apps on ChatGPT and Gemini and so on. It's still, by and large, this idea that you can have your app, but the only way people are going to be using it is because is you're going to go to your pre-existing distribution and you're going to say, okay, now use our app directly. Unless there is a system where, when I talk to an agent, let's say when I talk to ChatGPT, it immediately prioritizes, it looks out for a bunch of different MCP servers. It takes data from there and in an open world environment. And therefore, now I have ranking to do where I say, okay, my MCP should come in before their MCP, so on and so forth. So tell me a bit about discoverability. Tell me a bit about competition within the space in terms of multiple people having their MCPs. And then lastly, tie it up with, how do you expect that critical mass to come in? Because I feel like the moment discoverability is unlocked, this industry is going to be on fire, just because of the, if for nothing else, just FOMO that would be
yeah.
there.
Well, I think we are right now at the equivalent of the internet pre-Google, meaning that before Google, the only way to find a website was to have billboards in the street saying go to www.something.com.
Hmm.
And that was the only way. It's like people were making ads in papers for internet businesses, and you
Hmm.
were making ads in the streets because that was the distribution. That's how you finding people. And then Google arrived, and this whole thing completely exploded. I mean, Google and Yahoo and a few others created that search, and it completely blew out. So I think this is where we are at right now. It's like exactly what you said. Why should I even care building an MCP server if no one even knows that it exists? And we're still very much in that chicken and egg situation. I would say, except for B2B businesses. Because for B2B businesses, SaaS, HR system, CRM, ERP, whatever, you name it, all the SaaS in the world, this has already started because their users are spending most of their time in Cloud and ChatGPT every day, or Cloud Code or Codex or whatever they're using. And they want to use their tools through agents. So it's not only cool to have an MCP server. I think it's a question of being alive a year or two from now if you don't do it. And it can be MCP, CLI, whatever, you name it, APIs, but no one is going to use your dashboard in a few months from now. So
Hmm.
this is super encouraging because that kind of shows us what's already happening super, super fast in the B2B world, which where we have a ton of customers already as well. And that's the big wave of B2C hasn't really took off right now. And the reason is exactly what you said, is that the platforms where most of the users are, meaning Cloud, Gemini, ChatGPT, haven't unlocked, except for Cloud, we'll talk about it later, dynamic discovery. Here we call it dynamic discovery. It's like, hey, I'm looking for pizza. Here are like three ways of buying pizza. The only one who actually now unlocking that a little bit is Entropic with Claude. In Claude, I actually made the test just this afternoon, so it's funny. I was doing a demo with a customer. It's like, hey, I'm looking for a pizza delivery to my office. And
Mm.
it literally gave me three connector options. Say, hey, you can use Uber Eats, you can use Glovo, which is a European competitor, and you can use another one. And what's amazing is that he gave me that as a first answer without doing any web search. He didn't go to the internet. He didn't try to find things on the website. He just, his first answer is like, hey, I just looked into my connector registry. Here's the three options to do it. And if I say no, then he's going to go to the internet and try to find options. But if I say yes, boom, he's going to pop up an MCP connection and just give me options to deliver that pizza to my house. And which is interesting because we see that one of the leading model provider is prioritizing AI answer, AI native answer over web search. And that's the first time we see that in the history of MCP. It's like first I'm looking to what kind of connection I have. Two, I can go and try to find things on the internet. Um, it's super exciting. We actually have one of our first customer called Kiwi.com. They are like they were the first online travel agency to be available in cloud. And to be honest, when we talk to our customers, say, "Well, why don't we put it on cloud?" But that was 8 months ago, and nobody was using cloud but for coding at the time. So it was just a bet. And since the dynamic discovery uh, has been activated, so the behavior I just described before, the traffic has been literally exploding, meaning that people are discovering it a lot, they're connecting it, and they're using it at a scale we could not even imagine just 3 months ago. So I think this is a good indication of the wave that's coming. I think the discoverability is it's a hard problem to solve. I don't think I think it's harder than Google. I mean, again, all comparison apart, the Google algorithm was just absolutely bananas 20 years ago.
Mm.
But the user experience is harder.
Mm.
Like the search thing, we had, I mean, it was like links and a list. Now, how do you present that to people that are used to have a chat answer? And now you can have like potentially connectors and you can have potentially ads because obviously if you have discoverability, you might have ad in the mix. How do you make sense of all of that in a chat interface? I think the UI UX is very, very complicated. And that's not the only one, but one of the reasons I think some of the chatbots are afraid of it. And they are going slower than we could have anticipated. For example, ChatGPT came out with their app store like 8 months ago, and they still do very little dynamic discovery. So, I mean, I think it's a very, very incredible topic. How do you make it happen? What's the UI? Is the UI is going to be generated on the fly? Is the UI is going to be controlled by the brand? Can you mix a bunch of connectors to have just one UI? Uh, how does the brand appear if you start mixing brands in an answer? How do you mix chat and widgets because the UI won't disappear completely? There's so many, I mean, questions that are still up in the air, which are really wide open for like startups and innovators to take over.
No, that makes sense. And I think while we do say that there's gonna be a couple of major players who are gonna win eventually, like sort of Google. But I think more than those couple of winners, I think they whoever wins is going to enable an ecosystem that is going to enable millions of new use cases, new opportunities, new problems to solve. And so people are so stuck on one winner takes all mentality, they're failing to realize that the winner is really just building the foundational layer. What comes on top and later is where the real value is. But I'm gonna bring this to a wrap up as well, but I'm just sort of curious. You mentioned dynamic discovery in terms of, if I'd ask a certain question, it is going to go into its existing database of existing MCP servers, and it's going to recommend something, and based on that, I can sort of click on it, and then I can start a new user experience where now I'm within the app and I'm sort of using it as a widget within the sort of chat interface. Now that principally works, but ChatGPT was the same thing. They came out with this with their app store, and the first 100 apps were easy. It was Spotify, it was Uber, it was this or that. But then what happens when there are a million apps in the same category? How do
Yes.
you rank them in terms of what appears first? The advertising play is the simplest, I think, right now, where just pay us money and we'll put you, who will make you appear. If people are interested, they'll go for it. It's the more organic discovery, which is the more complicated part, where again, I think pizza shop is still easy. It's just taking your location and then potentially just looking at some reviews and saying, okay, there's a middle ground. Let's rank it accordingly, and you can optimize it for every person. But for a vast majority of other use cases that are not geography dependent, how do you sort of ensure that the two, three options, because Google could give you 10 options and then you could say next, 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 and you could actually go to 100 options. In this user experience, when you only have the opportunity to rank like two or three maximum options,
Yeah.
is there is the has the ranking been solved, or at least an early signs of how ranking might go in that discovery phase once it's no longer just the brand name businesses, when for a use case you have to completely come across some business that you have no idea exists, and then you have to start interacting with it.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree. There's like 8 million apps in the iOS App Store, and there's like a zillion websites. So the problem is coming. There's now about 1,500 application in ChatGPT. There were like only, I think, 100 in February. So it's growing really fast, and the problem is kind of almost already there. I would say the the discoverability piece would probably the early signs of that. We've been looking deeply at everything that Anthropic and ChatGPT has been implementing. There's a couple of early signs. So, for example, by scraping the Anthropic API, we've seen a few APIs appearing a few weeks ago. One is actually rank.
Okay.
So what a rank is? Well, they've been ranking all the application one way or another. We don't know exactly how, but there's one API that returned to the model rank. Um, Another one is trending. There's like a feedback coming back with trending, which is what we've been exploring is over the past 7 days, how many hits, how many new connections you had from users. Um, Another one that we've seen emerging in ChatGPT is that you have this little thumbs up, thumbs down that is appearing just nearby the widget, which can be also a way of proactively proposing applications because they are loved or less loved by others. So that's kind of early signs of what they're trying, what they're iterating, which is very basic, right? If you compare that with the Google algorithm, that's
Mm.
that's very, very basic. But this is where we're at. Then you can imagine, I think, what's interesting is that these models know us even more than Google, which is crazy, right? Because Google used to say like, well, Google and Facebook, they know everything about me. It's crazy, but now these guys they know really everything about us. We're talking about our personal life, we're talking about our friends, we're talking about work, we're talking about the new products we want to buy, we're talking about our kids going to school and stuff. They know literally everything. So I think they have a gold mine of using in a smart way, obviously, because if they do it without any privacy, it's going to get wild. But if they do it in a smart way, they can use some of that data to really go and pick the right product and service for you. That being said, I think there's going to be it's going to be harder to be on the top, because I don't think the model will bother going through 25 or 30, or showing you 25 or 30 options. I think, like you said, it might be showing 3, 5, but I don't think it's going to be like 15 on the page and then like 100 page that nobody never really got to.
Mm.
So I think there's a prime to being there first, because you're going to learn more, and if you're good, you're going to pick up. So I think that's why there's some FOMO as well from the industry, because I definitely think there will be a prime to be there first. And I think there will be a prime to really understanding deeply this technology and iterating on it. For example, one thing that uses as well Anthropic and ChatGPT is the description of the tool. So being super crisp on the way you're describing your MCP server might be a new SEO type of thing. So yeah, again, I think the Discoverability bot is just getting started. We're just scratching the surface, and the people that crack it early, when it becomes big, are going to win a lot.
That makes sense. One last question in terms of this. Look, a lot of the way that we imagine these sort of MCPs, particularly with a UI widget of sorts, is through a lot of these major chatbots. So ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. We're saying you are already interacting with them, and as you interact with them, you're going to discover, let's say, an app, and then you're going to interact with that app, and you need a widget for that. The way that that interaction actually is evolving is for specific use cases, as I mentioned earlier. For example, Oli exists for managing your family affairs. There are legal agents. There are a bunch of different specific use case agents that you're interacting everywhere. You're interacting with them on messages. You're interacting with them on WhatsApp. You're interacting with them wherever you can essentially send or receive a message. And that sort of again convolutes the entire problem, because now the interaction layer is no longer just text and an interface around, let's say, ChatGPT, right, where widgets are allowed. Some of these agents you're actually interacting with through voice. Maybe you're calling them. Maybe you're just saying, "Okay, you know." So it's very difficult to create a unified user experience where you can throw out widgets and this and that. And in many ways, you're still with widgets, you're still saying there's, at the end of the day, a human at the end of the loop, right? So the human is going in and they're making that decision. You're giving it options, but the human will be the one who has the agency to decide what to do. Increasingly, we're now going towards a point where the human is just talking to to that agent, and the agent is interacting with the MCP for all intents and purposes. Do you think we're going to begin to see third party discovery apps in the first place, that will be agnostic to these platforms and can actually feed into any agent or agentic experience to begin with? Again, what I mean by that is, yes, a ChatGPT might have 800 million users, but right now, what's happening with a lot of companies is they're saying, okay, we'll deploy your apps on Claude and Gemini and OpenAI. Sure, but then what about Ollie? Does Ollie go to Claude and uses the API and the tokens to then find you? And then how does that technology sort of work? Because and as a layman, I understand the chat interface. How does the API technology come into play with MCPs as well, right? So how does that sort of does that make sense to you? What I just said?
It makes sense. I think that's one of the beauty of having a protocol, is that hopefully you don't have to build something new for every new interface out there.
Mm.
And it's like, again, going back to the early days of the internet. Back in the days, your websites weren't really rendering the same way in Firefox and Google Chrome and Internet Explorer, and you had to tweak a little bit your website to have the same user experience. So hopefully people converge around one or two protocols. That there's going to be protocol wars, and then one's going to leave and another one's going to die. Regarding the user experience, it's kind of funny, because I think I think WhatsApp has probably the highest potential to win
Mm,
there because the whole world, I mean, a big part of the Western world is on WhatsApp,
mm,
and your friends are on WhatsApp, and more your work on WhatsApp. I'm now closing deals on WhatsApp, which actually
yeah.
doesn't make any sense. And so I think they are a huge opportunity to also be able to be a place where this agentic experience happen.
Mm,
Funnily enough, we made a demo a week ago to actually render an MCP app in an iframe inside a WhatsApp chatbot. So it's a bit clunky and hacky, but we made it work. Um, so yeah, I think the at the end of the day, there's two things that's going to be important. First is to have an AI native interface,
mm,
one or several, depending on where the industry is going. Two, so you want to be sure that everyone can find you, whether it's like Holly, Clobot, WhatsApp agent, ChatGPT, Cloud. Two, investing in being discovered and making sure that whether you're on the ChatGPT ecosystem, the Cloud ecosystem, or like an open world ecosystem where any Cloud agent can potentially find you, you find a way to be there and to be the one that these guys are finding and not your competitors. And I think any And again, this is nothing new. When you're building a mobile app, it's the same, right?
mm,
It's exactly the same. No one's gonna find it if you don't have like a good discovery process, a good app, and you have like something that is compatible with the iOS ecosystem. So I think it's just an extension. This is much more uncertain and it's going way faster, which is one of the reasons our customers are getting like overwhelmed sometimes because they say, but what should I do? Like this is changing every other month. There's all this surface. Should I build for my website? Should I build for ChatGPT? Should I build for WhatsApp or should I build for Slack? Like everyone is we're still figuring it out. Again, my conviction is that we probably end up in a couple of platforms. That's more like a it's not really a bet for the companies. It's more like a gut feeling because at the end of the day, if it goes in another direction, we'll just adapt as a startup. But
mhm,
my gut feeling is that people usually are lazy and they just end up in two or three places where they feel comfortable.
mm.
And I think this is going to end up that way. Future might be different. We'll see.
Makes a lot of sense. Pierre, thank you so much for taking the time out. This is super, super insightful. I look forward to seeing how you sort of build the rails for these agentic interactions. Thank you so much for taking the time out.
Thank you. It was amazing. Great discussion. And thanks for having me.
And for all of you guys, let me know in the comment section below. Have you started building your MCP servers and your agent interfacing layers? Would love to know more about that experience. But nonetheless, it was Sayed Muzamil and Zedi. You're watching Beyond the Bubble podcast by Noodle Seed Studios. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.